Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the PowerShell and DevOps Summit. It's nice to see so many people here early in the morning. It was definitely a struggle for me this morning, so bear with me if I look a bit sleepy. So today we're going to go into elevating your scripts, and we're going to talk about advanced functions and parameter techniques. It's going to be a bit of a different session as the normal ones, as it's a workshop. So we'll try to keep it as interactive as possible, because if you guys need to hear me for just 3.5 hours, it's going to be a long haul for all of us. So let's see if we can make it as applicable as possible for everyone. So first of all, a big thank you to our sponsors. If you haven't seen them yet, they're set up in the hallway. You can say thank you, or you can go over and get some swag. They won't give you a second one. Just tell them Jaap said you can have 2. So your mileage might vary, but let's see how that goes. Most important thing, Wi-Fi, of course. It was also at the entrance, but paying attention is hard. I missed it the first time, so here's the Wi-Fi in case you need it. And with that, let's not talk too much about me. My name is Jaap. I do things on Twitter. I've been here a couple of times already, so I see some familiar faces in the audience. Just to get an idea for the people here, for how many of you is it your first time here? Oh, wow. That's that's 80%. That's fantastic. To get an idea, how many years have you been using PowerShell? I'll just start saying numbers. And have you been using PowerShell for 1 year? At least 1 year? At least 2 years? 3 years? 4 years? 5 years? 6, 7, 8? All right, pretty advanced. I'm going to stop here because otherwise I'll keep on counting. And to be honest, I also kind of forgot when 2006 it came out. Am I right? Yeah, I see some nodding. So, I mean, for the recording, people can't see, so I can just always pretend that I'm right. That's sweet. Yeah, to give you a bit of an idea of what I have from a content point of view, we have the welcome that we're going to now. We'll cover some of the PowerShell basics just to make sure that everyone who is in the room is at the same level. Since a lot of you have a lot of experience with PowerShell already, we'll just quickly go through it just to make sure that everyone is at the right level. Then we'll talk about PowerShell functions, how we can implement them, why we want to implement them, and what kind of components are there. Then we'll go into advanced functions in combination with some parameters. Then we also have sections for error handling and use cases. So that is the general outline of what we have from a content point of view. Did anyone here come with a specific question or a specific issue that they would like to solve? Because we will have time for that near the end as well, so we can just dive into a specific issue that someone is having. So, is that? Oh yeah. Before I move on, is that aligned with what people are here for? Yeah, sounds good. Well, sounds good so far. You've just heard me talk for 5 minutes so far. We're going to keep on going for a while. Cool. So 3.5 hours with a half-hour break. The break is like in 1.5 hours, if I'm not mistaken. For everyone here, since I don't want to hear myself talk the entire time, can you introduce yourself to the person sitting next to you? If you already know each other, just pretend and just mumble. I can't hear what you're saying anyway. Because we have a small room with, well, not a small audience, but a decent-sized audience. I would like to encourage you to interrupt me whenever you disagree with something or you want to know more about the topic. Raise your hand or just shout Jaap. That's my name. I say minimal slides. Well, the total slide number is there. It might or might not be accurate. We'll go into more code than slides. That's definitely the challenge and the intention. And everything will be online afterwards and uploaded. So for any of the code samples, you don't need to take photos. The idea is also when I'm showing certain samples, and it's something that you have encountered or you're struggling with, or you have a different kind of implementation, raise your hand. I'll be happy to answer any questions or to clarify further what the intention is or how we can do things better. Does that make sense? Yeah, so the topics, we have some slides to explain the basic concepts. We have examples to show functionality. I try to make it as closely related to real-world examples. We'll end up with a bunch of real-world examples as well. If you have any specific samples that you would like me to take a look at, that's always a more what's the word for it? A more exciting one, to get some live samples from the audience. Doesn't always work out great, and sometimes the samples are better than my code. Well, usually. Yeah, so those are the questions. What kind of things are you struggling with? What kind of project are you proud of? These are questions that you can think of now. We'll get back to that later on in the session, in the second part. The third one, I would like to know, how many of you are already writing PowerShell functions? All right, excellent. That's a pretty good number. So yeah, then the basics should be familiar as well. Verb singular noun, so don't use plural. If you do use plural, nowadays in VS Code, you will get a squiggly line if you don't use approved verbs. But I've seen it quite often when it just comes up with verbs. With plural verbs. I like to do the same with my variables as well, because the amount of time where I have server and servers and then do a for each to go to it, and I mistype it, or I turn it around and then my script doesn't work the way I expected, or I'm using a wrong variable, happened too many times and waste half a day trying to troubleshoot that. So I always try to make it as clear as possible for myself. Because I failed way too many times. Whenever I don't know, get help, get command, get member, the usual suspects to get to the bottom of why something isn't working. Yeah, the important thing is understanding that when you're working with PowerShell, you're working with objects, and those objects always have properties, and they might not always be the properties you expect them to be. A good example of that is if you've ever used getProcess, the default output of getProcess, if you then try to select those properties won't exist because they're actually just display properties. So it's important to use those and to get in, understand what they're used for. Yeah, so PowerShell, Windows PowerShell, what's going on there? Less relevant nowadays because how many of you are still actively using Windows PowerShell? Okay, that's what's that? Yeah, customers. Yeah, always fun. Yeah, it's not too long ago that I still had to write PowerShell 1 code because I didn't have the authority to upgrade PowerShell on some 2003 servers. So if anyone worked with PowerShell 1, there were no modules. So good luck writing anything for PowerShell 1. Yeah, it's been open sourced in 2016. What it meant when it was open sourced, it was available on all platforms. It was initially called PowerShell Core. Wasn't the best idea, but it was a very Microsoft idea because then they could rename it again. Because renaming product names is You know it's a good product if it had at least 3 renames. We started with PWSH instead of PowerShell.exe. It works on all devices. I see more MacBooks in the audience. I have a MacBook as well. It just works. It's more than just a scripting language. It's an automation framework. There's a lot of components that tie into PowerShell. There's PowerShell drive, so you have the registry, you have PowerShell drive for variables, for your functions. What else do we have? We have, of course, Pester, and it's, of course, also a shell. So that's then some of the basics. So we have functions and commandlets. So question for the audience, what's the difference between a function and a commandlet? Anyone wants to step up? So the answer from the audience was that a function uses a function keyword, and a commandlet comes from a script. It's slightly more, to be slightly more precise, it comes from a compiled module. So a module can contain many functions, then there are still functions, but it's called a commandlet if it's been compiled, so if it's been written in C#, for example. And then we also have external applications, and external applications are any application that we can execute from PowerShell, but mostly the ones that are in your path. So if you type ping.exe or traceroute or anything like that, those are the external applications. One of the interesting things of what is coming up this year with PowerShell 7 and what was put on the roadmap for PowerShell is that they're going to work on improved reliability for the exit codes and the output of external applications. So there are some challenges with the external applications because anything that is called from PowerShell is of course going to be structured output, and any external application is just dumb text. So then we have to parse it again, and there's different output streams. I won't bore you with that. We're not here for that one.
Are you talking about Crescendo?
Sorry?
Are you talking about Crescendo?
I'm not talking about Crescendo, no. But that is an interesting one as well, yeah. One of the things to keep in mind, don't accept the defaults, just configure PowerShell the way you want to configure it. I like Oh My Posh because it makes customizing your shell a lot easier. I used to do it myself and just write everything in my profile. This is a lot easier. You can just get a theme set up, and then it's going to be uniform no matter you're running PowerShell from the Windows terminal, from Bash, from any kind of shell. You can customize it. So if you are not using it yet, this is one that I enjoy using. Other things to keep in mind, there's aliases. So you can set up your own aliases. If you use the new alias command, it's of course only going to be there for the duration of your console session, or if you put it in a script for the duration that your script is running. So if you want to use aliases, you can also set them up in your profile, so you have shorthand available to run all the other commands. Array indexing. Anyone want to go for the bonus question here? What is array indexing in PowerShell? So, no, that's fair. The comment is in what context. So in any array that you have in PowerShell, you can use the square brackets, and you can dive directly into any kind of object to see what the sub objects of that array are, and it can be multiple levels deep. PowerShell profiles, you can customize your shell, and of course also customize which modules you have available using the PowerShell gallery. If you're not using Visual Studio Code and you're still on ISE, probably should be using it by now. And the idea of this whole session is to expand your PowerShell toolbox and to give you more tools available to write better functions and to help you be more successful with anything you do with PowerShell. And so here I took a couple of screenshots of Windows PowerShell just to kick it off, to give some examples of what we can use it for. So get host, we can get some version information about the specific host that's running PowerShell. Not to be confused with your PowerShell version, because your PowerShell version you get with PS version table. To get the commands you have available, get command, already mentioned that one. We have all the object commandlets, so we have select object, group object, where object for each object. We can also sort them using sort object. Right here, I'm using shorthand for that, an alias. All right. Let's.
Could you tell me where the application?
Could you repeat your question?
Yeah.
So the question is, where do the external applications come from that are available in PowerShell? So what I'll do is I'll open up VS Code. I'll just run it, and we can also check what kind of size we need. Because you're sitting in the back, is this? Can you read it from there? And I'll make it white as well. That's probably a good idea. There we go. That should be better. Is that good in the back? Can I see some nodding? Yeah, good. So the question was, where do we get our commands from? So if we do get command, we have a couple of parameters available here. So we'll take a look at what type of commands. Type. And then the applications, so those are the external applications. So where are they coming from? Is it just Windows system, or is it just your current path? So it is anything that is specified in your path variable. So I'm on macOS now. So anything that's in your default path that's always going to be available, that is what you'll see in here. All right. So using the object commands, we can sort and filter two objects, make sure that it's displayed in ways that we want to be able to work with it. There we go. If we want to get help in PowerShell, that's actually something that was a lot better in Windows PowerShell compared to the PowerShell we're currently working with. So nowadays PowerShell ships without help. So if you want to get access to any help, you should first run update help before the help commands are available, or at least the help text is available. It's also possible to get the help displayed in an external window. There's some options available there. So we can use show window. This one by default is only available in Windows PowerShell, unless you install on Mac. It would be available if you install an additional module for graphical tools. Show command is also a good way to make it visual how a command works. And the reason I like show command is because it can give you a good overview of how the different parameter sets operate and which parameters are available for each of the parameter sets. Because I do occasionally struggle, especially if I'm writing my own functions, to get a good idea of which parameters I specified where and which ones are in which parameter set. There's also more. So more allows you to get the scrolling effect. So if you have a long list, that it doesn't keep on going. Then we have out grid view. That's another graphical way of outputting your data. So what we can also see is by default, it also displays the same properties that are the default properties. So if you want to see everything here, so all the columns, you'll still have to use select star. It can also work with pass-through. And what pass-through gives you is you can filter, you can manipulate what you select in there. If you would press OK, you would be able to kill or do any kind of operation there. So what I like about out grid view, if you want a lazy, easy interaction with some kind of GUI, out grid view can be quite helpful there, and also to visualize what kind of data you're working with. So you can filter through it to see if when you're piping an array to your function or to your script, you can see what is happening there. Obviously, I wasn't going to run this one locally because that would kill my presentation. So. What's that? Yeah, that's a good addition. So what was mentioned was that you can also select multiple objects directly from out grid view. So in my case, I'd filtered it just to PowerPoint. But if I would select in combination with a combination of either holding Shift or holding Control or doing a regular expression, I could also kill Word and Notepad or 2 PowerPoint windows, but leave the third one open. Those kind of options are all indeed possible. Thank you. Okay, that's interesting. So I got an addition for the recording and the people in the back. There's also a command to limit the amount of options you can put in there to just a single or to multiple. So then you would make it impossible to select multiple. That's an option I never used. Thank you. I love workshops. I'm learning here. Sweet. Yeah. I already mentioned there's more PowerShell drives available than just the file system itself. We have the file system, of course. On Windows, we would have the registry, the multiple registries. All your variables are also available as a PowerShell drive. And you can use that to, I use that for troubleshooting whenever something doesn't work in my function. I can step into my function and just take a look at which variables are all defined at any point in time using the debugger. It's really good for logging as well. You can just dump all your variables at any point in your function just to get an idea of what was going on at that point in time. So it's quite powerful. Also, all your functions are also defined there, and you can also access them and change them from there, which you can use to your benefit, or use it to escalate privileges or do fun stuff. It's also the environment variables, so you could use that to establish which external commands would be available because your environment variables are also defined there. Yeah, of course, .NET. PowerShell is built on top of .NET, .NET Core for new PowerShell. You can use .NET directly from PowerShell, so it's a cool feature. Even .NET developers don't get that directly from a shell, so we have it. So it can be quite a powerful way. What, in my experience, I would use .NET methods most for is if a PowerShell command is very slow, or you're working with extremely large data sets, and you need to accelerate how fast something runs, then it can be beneficial to use .NET methods to limit the amount of data you're working with, make it a smaller sub-selection, use faster processes, because PowerShell is like that big army knife we saw, it can do a lot of things, but because it can do a lot of things, it can, in some cases, be, it's not very slow, but slower than I would like it to be. For those cases, going directly to the underlying .NET types and using those to do the comparisons can be quite beneficial. Something I used to do a lot more in the past, not so much anymore these days, WMI querying and getting information from systems or my own system. Does anyone know what the current day commandlet is for that? Yeah, perfect. Was it a question, or did you also want to answer? Okay, cool. And it's also possible to write things directly to the clipboard. In this case, I'm using a clip, but it's also possible to use set clipboard. The difference between using clip, at least on Windows, the difference between using clip and set clipboard is that clip is an external application. So it just takes whatever PowerShell outputs and it takes the text. Set clipboard will allow you to have the full PowerShell objects or the full .NET objects. So what you can do with set clipboard is, for example, you can do a selection of, let's say, 500 files according to whatever kind of filter you set up in your get child item, and set them all to your clipboard so you can paste them somewhere else. So you can have quite rich interactions with the clipboard using PowerShell, and it's something that I've used it for a lot of things, but it's not something that I've seen happen a lot in the wild. Another thing you can use it for is if you're, it's a good way to explain this. For example, what I needed to do was I needed a way in the development environment to be able to log in with 2FA, but I didn't have a connection between my browser and between PowerShell. So I would have PowerShell monitor the clipboard, and I had a janky Chrome plugin that I could press, and I could just take whatever token was used in the browser. So I could just take over my Azure token and use that to run all my commands in PowerShell. So there's some fun things you can do with the clipboard that can be quite interesting. So in this case, yep, I'm doing that, setting it all to the clipboard, and we can copy paste it anywhere. So that was all the Windows PowerShell. The rest of the demos will all be running locally on my MacBook. So what we're going to do, we're going to go over a couple of those commands that I've already shown as well. And if you have any questions, just interrupt me or raise your hand. What I've noticed so far, the people that interrupt me usually get an answer quicker. So use that to your advantage. All right. So if you're using VS Code, just to, that's VS Code pets. also very important. I didn't enable that one for this session. I just want to make sure that it wasn't, I just like having clippy walk around. Make sure you have PowerShell. It makes it a lot easier to interact with PowerShell on VS Code. With that, so you can already see we have our first error. It cannot find get command. And here we see if we do get help for get command, the reason it wasn't there is because I wrote it with 3 M's. We can see that we get the basic information about about get command, but we don't get any of the actual help. So if we want the actual help, we can run update help. I actually had to uninstall PowerShell and reinstall it just so I didn't have the help here. And now we should be able to get some better output. So we can see now we get an actual description, synopsis, that kind of thing. Another one that I enjoy when using get help is the online switch. What that does, it will open up the help page in your browser, because it's okay to use your console for help, but a browser is, in my opinion, a lot better suited to actually read through documentation, to Control F through it. So I prefer that whenever I'm working with help. Finding, installing modules, find module. So let's see if the Wi-Fi is good enough that we can actually find it. You can see some SQL, some SQL, probably the best SQL module that is out there, DBA tools. And installing it is also easily done. As you can see, I didn't set up my installation. I didn't set up my installation policy because I reset my PowerShell installation so I wouldn't have get help anymore. Yeah, I'm gonna cancel out of that one. Sweet. All right. Yeah. So using get command, we can see the version of the command, what the source is. The reason why this can be important, you can install multiple versions of the same module. When you're developing functions, you might be working on multiple versions of your module or your function as well. So using get command can also give you the insights to see if a function is defined multiple times. That can lead to issues like not getting the output that you're expecting when you're working on your function. Don't ask me how I know, but I might have wasted half a day on that as well. And it shows 4 properties by default. There's of course a lot more information available on it. And what we can also see is where it's loaded from. So in this case, let's just look here. So we can. So we can see that it comes from this source. So if we want to run this function specifically from the Microsoft PowerShell utility, we can prefix the function with this and then execute it. So if there would be multiple get date functions or commandlets available, you can choose the one that you want to use and not waste half a day like I did. Yeah, then we have get date. So what do you think will happen if I run this command? So we have get date. I put it into a variable, and I get all the information, and I do select object star. So select object star, we're going to see everything. What will we see in the console when we run this one? Anyone have an idea? Will we see anything? Will we see nothing? Yeah, that's the interesting thing about this one. So if you do parentheses around a variable definition, you can both define the variable and as well output it immediately in the console. So it's a bit of a trick, but I find it quite useful whenever I'm developing my code, so I can immediately see if the function if what is assigned to the variable is actually what I expect it to be. So we can see it also outputs it. So this is, sorry that the taskbar pops up. I'm on an incline here, so whenever my mouse goes down, that pops up. So it's similar to using out variable with pass-through. So that is what that does. We can also directly, because we defined it now, we can also take a look at the different parameter sets that we have available there. Let's make this one bigger. So we can see there's a lot of parameter set information in there. And that is why I mentioned use show command instead, because show command shows you this in a lot easier and more understandable way. And similar for get child item, this is also one that has many different parameter sets, and based on what you're trying, which parameter set you want to use, you can establish that using get command and show command. Sweet. So that is our introduction, just to get everyone up to speed to some of the basics. Any questions before we move on? All right then. Then we continue with a couple of slides, but before we get into the slides, just to get an idea, how many of you have written a PowerShell module already? Excellent. Then you are most likely going to be aware of what we use functions for. So functions is what we use to build our modules to make sure we have repeatable building blocks that we can reuse and make our code reusable. So we can write a piece of code once and reuse it as many times. A single function, yeah, that's not very clear, but a function should have a single purpose. So a function should do one thing, like get date. It gets the date, it outputs the date. The idea of it is that you don't repeat yourself. My opinion of it is don't make a function out of everything, because if you try to turn everything into a function, you might overcomplicate your code. But in 90% of the cases, using functions is the correct way. But don't go overboard, just like with everything in life, I suppose. Why use functions? Well, to simplify development, so you can make your scripts easier to understand, because it's easier to understand your script when it says run this function. We have the output. We set it to a variable, or we pipe it into the next part of the script. You can make it easier to understand, and you make it easier to read, and you encourage reusability of your code. Because if you have that function, you can just plop it down in a module, and you don't have to copy paste that same piece of code over if you're writing a similar piece of code or something that might need to make use of that. So the syntax of a function, we start off with function, the name of the function, already mentioned how that should be formatted, and then the function block. So that's anything between the what's it called, the curly braces, the script block. When we have parameters, it can either be a switch parameter. So a switch parameter is kind of like a Boolean, but not truly a Boolean. So it's either a switch parameter is, for example, -4 in get child item or in remove item. It has 3 states. It can either be absent, so not specified, which in most cases is similar to being false. You can specify it, and how it's different from a Boolean is if you do -force, you don't have to say it's true because it's present. And you can also specifically specify it to be false. And if you want to do that with a switch parameter, you have to use colon and then $sign false. And we have the normal parameters that take arguments like get child item dash name. And the arguments, you can set specific types for it. That's something that's also encouraged whenever you're writing your functions, to make sure that you set up your types for all the different parameters. So you can do the validation, you can do the input validation based on that. And that is something we'll also go into when we go into parameters, how we can make sure that the input is exactly the way it's supposed to be. Any questions so far? Otherwise, I'll demo some function code. So if it's a switch parameter, and you can see that if you do get help or if you do get command, so you can see what kind of input is expected. Also, when you read the help documentation, it will specify the input type that's expected. If it expects a Boolean, then it's just like any parameter that takes in input, then you don't do a colon. If it's a switch parameter, then you have to use the colon, but you only have to use the colon when you want to set it to false. But in my opinion, it's a poor implementation if there's ever a case where you need to set it to false. Ooh, that one. I'll switch out of that one. So yeah, there we are. I think let's do. I think get item also has that. There we go. Get item has this force, I think. Does it? Yes. Get help, get item. Let's do dash full. So that's outputs. Let's go up. And this is exactly the reason why I mentioned I prefer to look at this. So we can see here, if we look at force, we can see that it is a system management automation switch parameter. So the type of each of the parameters is specified. If it is specified, if it's your own function, you can also not specify it. It will take in anything. So for example, here we have string. That's also an interesting one to highlight because this is system string with the what do you call those? The blocky ones. So it means it can either be a single object or it can be an array of strings. Well, technically it could also be that it has to be an array, but that would be a poor implementation once again. So yeah, that's how you can see it, whether it's Boolean or switch. Whenever I write my functions, my modules, I use switch parameters. I never use Boolean because I haven't really seen a case where you would have to have Boolean. But it's not worth fighting over. But if I have the choice, I'll go for switch parameters.
But if you do use it, it shows you whether it's Boolean or string or switch.
Yep.
And that's one of the biggest values I think of get help when you use the full is it shows all the details. It shows whether it's required, mandatory, true, false. All these things are there.
And you can also look for the specific parameter, and then you can look it up more easily and don't waste your time like I just did. Yes.
Switch is also extremely good when default
Mm-hmm.
make something true. There are situations like need or dedo where you might want to force it to false.
Mm-hmm.
In which case a switch would be good. So there are situations where a Boolean can outweigh a switch.
Yeah.
Right. If you know something defaults to false and you want to force people to go true.
Yeah. Yeah, the other way of how you could fix that, so the feedback was if, for example, you have a command that can enable or disable dedupe, then you could have a switch parameter that is dedupe, and then you have to set it to false. That's what you're saying, right? What I would do in that case, I would either make, if it's just a command that only does dedupe, you could make two commands, enable dedupe and disable dedupe, or you could have set dedupe with two parameter sets, and one is enabled and one is disabled, and then both are identical with all the other parameters, but you can only have enabled or disabled. So you then have two switch parameters. So those are two ways of how you could work with that. Any other questions? No? Cool. Then let's look at some more code. So we'll start off with a simple function, or yeah, simple depends on the context, but this one should be relatively easy to understand. So we have the function keyword, get personal greeting. We have a parameter name. I'm not following my best practices so far because I just have it as a parameter. I didn't specify if it was a string, and it just outputs name. So that should be pretty straightforward. So by running the function, it doesn't execute the code. It just loads it into memory, and to see that it actually did. I don't know. Can you? Can I just get rid of the entire doc? What? Or just take out the mouse. I think that's even easier. Done. There's always a million solutions, but sometimes you should just go for the easiest one. Thank you. Thank you all. We're there. Yeah, then if we want to see our function definition, I mentioned that we can do get child item. Let's take a look into function. So we can see, so make it bigger then. We can see that our function should now be defined in here. What was it called again? Get personal greeting. Yep. And then we can also do personal, because it supports wildcards. And we could also, I think it's called definition, but that's always the fun thing of live coding. It's not, no, it is called definition. We can do expand property, and we can see our function definition. And this also get set, yep.
So I noticed like there wasn't any version of source info. Does that need to be set in the function, or is that module?
So yeah, the question is there's no version information, and there's also no source information, because this is just defined in memory during execution. So yeah, there's no version information. To be honest, it might be possible to define a version, but the way I would define version information is by putting it in a module and versioning it on that level. There might be another way to do it when it's in memory, but I've never done so. Although there is a way to load modules directly into memory without them ever touching disk, so that would be one way. But yeah, it gets it from the module, either from the module manifest or from the PSM one. Yeah. Sweet. Then, so if I run this, obviously it's going to say Jaap. So if I would run this, what would happen? It would be very upset because Jaap does not exist as a command, that is. I still like to think I exist, but... So what will this one do? Will this one work? No, well, otherwise I wouldn't have had a fourth example, so power of deduction. So this is what I did before I understood what advanced functions were. Whenever you have something that's not an advanced function or a function that doesn't have pipeline support built in natively, you can just parse through either an array or, in this case, a single entry, and just for each it in there. And what we can also see here is we're not specifying name, and it's still able to put that information into the right parameter. In this case, it's easy because we only have a name parameter, so obviously it's going to go in there. If it's not there, then you can use your parameter. You can use parameter options to determine which one is the one that takes pipeline input, and you can determine that on many different ways, because you can take different kind of parameter inputs with a single command, with a single function. One of the ways that it does this is also based on type. So if you would pipe in a process object into stop process, then it knows what to do. It knows what to do with that one. And because if your input object has a property that matches a parameter that takes pipeline input, it will automatically work, and you don't have to do any additional steps. So that is how you can enable yourself to get pipeline support in there. We'll do some examples of that as well, of course. So some other things for command discovery. So if we run pvd, we can see that we get our current path. We want to know which command is actually behind there. It's get location. So let's take a look at get location, get exactly the same output. What if we want to have some information about the driver on? We can see, all right, I've used a fair bit of my disk space already. Can also use getMember to dive a bit deeper, so we can see everything that's available, so the different properties, script properties, methods. Anyone want to go for the bonus question? What the difference is between a method and a property? Yeah, but the assigned values can sometimes be get and set, and that is indeed a good point that you made, is that sometimes there is some overlap, but in general the methods are going to be, you're going to make a change to the object or make some kind of modification, and some code will run in order to facilitate that. And that could be a function. In that case, it might be a script property or a method that you define there. A good example of that is, for example, if we do get item, let's get any kind of item. Let's do. So if we have welcome, our welcome PSM1, you can see we have a method available here that should be delete or remove. We have that. Yeah, we see. Yeah, open would work. So we can also directly delete the object without using remove, without using the remove item commandlet. So in that case, we've taken a look at the different properties that are there. We've established that this is how we can get the free space on our disk. So let's start writing a function around that, get some disk space, and see how that functions, and see how we can iterate and improve based on that. So we'll start off simple again. We don't have any parameters. We just go for wrapping this into a function, and this is the baseline of how easy a function can be. We can just output. We can output it directly. Thank you. What don't you like about it?
That number is meaningless to me as a human.
We'll go take a look at what we can do to make that better. Some of the comparison operators, we're going to run into that later on. And whenever you do anything in PowerShell, it's important to to have an understanding of those. So we have here, if we do DevOps equals summit, we get false. Not equals, we get true. What do we get with this one?
True.
We get true. What do we get with the next one? We get true. What do we get with this one? How about this one? we get false again. So this is one of the interesting behaviors of what PowerShell does. Is whatever we put on the left side of the comparison when we're using comparison operators, that is going to be the what's it called? That's going to be the property type that it tries to infer on the second type. So whenever you're doing comparisons, make sure that things are on the right side, because if you turn things around, it wouldn't necessarily give the same result. So
that's a good explanation on the about page for non-assembly operators that show exactly the pitfalls you can fall into.
documentation. Let's see. Is this the right version?
I don't know if they use especially this term, but
Left.
when you go to VS Code and write equals null, then click in.
Yep. Yeah. So that is another. I won't look it up live because I might not be able to find it directly, but we can see, for example, that here, because we are specifying an integer, and the second one is a string, but if we would convert this string to an integer, it would be the same value. That's why PowerShell will come back with 1, the integer, is going to be the same as 1.0, the string. So it will cast it to whatever the type on the left side is. Keep that in mind whenever you're doing comparisons. Put whatever is important for what you're comparing on the left side, and it can sometimes be counterintuitive. Specifically, when you're comparing things to null, put null on the left side so you know it's actually null. Whatever you're comparing with. The other thing that is interesting, because now we ended up on an about page, so there's also about pages, which is basically an entire PowerShell book worth of information about all the different functionality within PowerShell and how it interacts. I think most of it is has been around for a long time, and it's a pretty good source of information whenever you're struggling with a particular topic. I should have definitely made more use of this in the past, because I did dirty things in order to work around whenever I didn't understand something. So with that in mind, let's look at a function if we don't have any parameters. If we don't have any parameters defined, let's see how we can still get some output there. So we'll load up this function. So what we're going to do is still similar. We're still going to output get location. The difference I made there is I've now used the pipeline symbols as line breaks, and I indented it just to make people upset, because then some people are very particular about the indentation. So. So we can now see we're outputting a bit more information, because we have select object property. We still can't read it yet. Let's see if we use the slash. It will still get the same drive. But if I make something up, it will just error out. What we have here, this is different behavior from Windows PowerShell. In Windows PowerShell, whenever an error appears, we will get this big error message. The default behavior in PowerShell 7 is that it will only show a single message. You can change this. There's a variable for that or a commandlet. I'm not entirely sure. And you can set it to just output the entire error message. If you want to see the entire error, we have the error variable, and we'll do some indexing into it so we get the last one. And then, of course, we still need to display everything. And you can see more information and where it failed. If this, what's that? We also have get error. Error. Let's see, concise view, and there we go. So double tap, by the way, for anything when you're working in the console, you can get the entire list. So in this case, this is either an enumeration. I think this is an enumeration. What? Yep. And you can see anything that's in there. So let's do detailed view. And let's do it again. There we go. So now we get the longer error message.
Big normal view is 5.1.
Yeah. There we go. So this is the default as it was in PowerShell up to PowerShell version 5. So let's do a bit more. Let's do some test path. And let's do some flow control. So we use some if-else statement there. So we can go through that. So input is not as we expected. And let's put this into our drive space function now. And see if we can catch the error. So the default will still work. And if I run this one, it will no longer give an error message because it no longer goes into that path. Is this good error handling? It's not good error handling. We can suppress the errors though. Let's see. So let's take a look at variable and pref. So we have a couple of preferences here. So including error action preference. So we can also set it to silently continue here. That's one way to make sure that all your scripts run without any bugs and without any errors. And another good solution is to change the color of error messages to green. It's all about keeping up appearances. That's how I like to do it. So another thing, if we take a look at get available drive space, if we do get help, we see that even though we haven't defined any help information, it will already auto-generate some help. But because we don't have any parameters, it doesn't help us a whole lot. We can see that the command is available. If we do get function, we can see all the functions that we've defined in memory here. And I'll skip the star because that one's not that interesting. We can also see whether we have an advanced, whether this is an advanced function or a basic function. So this one is a basic function, and we can see that by commandlet binding, as commandlet binding is our keyword with which we are creating advanced functions. So if we're going to step it up and make it a, actually put some parameters in there. If we would run get help on this one now, we should be able to see that we have a parameter. So we can see we already have a syntax, and because we didn't specify the type of object that we put in there, it will just say object there. And if we do full, you can see more information about the parameter. So, for example, required and position. These are all options you can set for your different parameters. Currently, it's set in position 0 just because it's the only one, and well, we start counting at 0. But there are cases where you might have an entire list of parameters, but for some reason you would want the last parameter to be the first one in line. Then you can also set the position directly, rather than putting it in order. Cool. And let's see. Yeah, that's the basic functions. Any questions before we move on from this one? Let's see how we're doing on time. What time we need to have coffee? Good. We still have 15 minutes. I was told whatever I do, I should not go over 10:30. So I've been making very sure that I'm not going to cut into your coffee break, because otherwise you're the ones getting the cold coffee, and all the other rooms are going to get the hot coffee. So that's not going to be my intention. I'd say it's more something that you would do for clarity when you're working with parameter sets, because it can become confusing when you have parameter sets where some things are exclusive and other things are not exclusive, and then it can become hard to have the overview of which parameter is in which position. So then I would explicitly define it, not because I have to explicitly define it, but just to make clear where it is. Yep. Oh, but before we continue, the question was, is there any reason why you would explicitly define a position for a parameter? Yep. So the question is, I showed an example earlier where I did get item, and I showed that with get item, we could also remove an item directly instead of, for example, piping it to remove item. Are there cases why you would do that? I would say for readability, whenever I'm writing scripts and things I share with others, I tend to use the pipeline to just pipe things to, so it's clear, okay, we're getting something, we're using where object, we're filtering to it, and then we take an action on it. So from a readability point of view, I would write it that way. Are there reasons why I would use a remove method instead of doing that? Performance could be a reason. Another reason could be that because in essence, PowerShell commandlets or even PowerShell functions are wrappers around .NET functionality, and because they are wrappers, they might not have all the functionality available. So there might be some things you can do that are very specific to an object that either perform better or give you more flexibility if you use the underlying method. So performance could be a reason. Also, functionality could be a reason. Let's try to think of an example.
Would like the services methods be an example?
Services,
changing the state
Yeah, I think that's a
Good example.
that's a good example. But that also depends on the PowerShell version. So example I get example I got was services, where you can change the startup method. You can't do that with set service on Windows PowerShell. I think you might be able to do it now. Yeah. But there were basically two ways of doing that. So you could use the sim commandlets or the WMI commandlets to change the startup method, but you could also get the underlying .NET object, and then you could directly interact with the startup type. So that can be a reason. Another thing that came to mind, I've worked a lot with web requests and invoke REST method, invoke web request. On PowerShell, on Windows PowerShell, it was suboptimal. PowerShell 6, there were a lot of improvements, but I had a module that relied on invoke REST method and invoke web request. And so what I would do in that module is I would verify which version of PowerShell I was using and which version of invoke web request. And if I had invoke web request from a Windows PowerShell host or from PowerShell 5 or lower, I would tap into the underlying .NET object, so I could still get Unicode out of there, because otherwise I would just get ASCII back. And that works really well it works really well in the Netherlands. It works pretty good in the US, I would assume. But my Swedish customer wasn't too happy that they didn't get their proper database names anymore, and they just got question mark, question mark, question mark. It wasn't very helpful to them. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good point. So the addition to that was if you call a .NET method, or if you call a method of an object, which most likely is going to be a .NET method, but if it's a decom object or a com object or something, it might be that. You can't interrupt it. So if you would Control-C after that, it wouldn't stop. So for example, if you have a directory structure and you do remove item, if you find out that you did something dumb, you can Control-C it and you can not lose as many files. And if you would do it on the root with a remove method, you don't have the what if functionality and you can't interrupt it anymore. Good point. No. It's another reason to, does it work with that? No, it doesn't work with clipboard. No. Let's see. Yep. Cool. So we've talked a bit about parameters and what we can do with it. Let's go into some specifics. What I'll do is, I think, how many slides do I have on parameters? It should be like 5 or so. Oh, there we go, it's even less than 5. So what I'll do is, we'll discuss these. It's now 10:20, so it should be 10:25 when I finish. Then we can all be the first to the coffee and make sure we get the hot coffee and not the other. So the parameter syntax. So we define our function. So we have function get personal greeting. We have the parameter block, and inside there we can set up our parameters. So notation can be just string name. Then we say it's going to be a string. If you put the square brackets in there, then we can make sure it's an array. We can do more definitions. So we can say parameter, mandatory true, string name is, and we can also set default values. So that is something that whenever I'm trying to convince one of my colleagues to move to functions or to stop writing scripts in which somewhere in the middle of their script they're going to define some default variables, and then whenever you try to reuse that script, it's not reusable because They just define everything inside inside of the script. So just having a parameter block at the top and just putting all your definitions there. By the way, the parameter block also just works for script files. It's not exclusive to functions. And also parameter sets can be set up there. So the best practices are use descriptive parameter names. So if you just make it object 1, object 2, object 3, it's not going to be very helpful. Your parameters, they can also have comment-based help. So comment-based help, we haven't covered it yet. We'll show some in the demos. You can just put a comment block, just a comment above your function directly, above your parameter directly, and you can write whatever you want to write about it. Or you can put an entire comment block either in front of your function or what is typical is before the parameter block inside of the function. Both work. I usually put it inside of the function to make it clear that it is part of the function. And let's see, parameter validation. You can set specific types like the string or like an integer or a switch parameter. You can also validate if something is what you expect it to be. So what we saw when we were using the error, what was it called? The error. Yeah, error view. So with error view, we had an enum there, so we can just tap through it. If you have a validate set for your parameter, you can also just tap through it, or if you do tap twice, you will see the entire list of options available. So you make it more user-friendly as well. So for someone that is using your scripts or using your functions, you make it more discoverable what is possible. Because even if you don't write any documentation for it, it's somewhat documented because at least people know what can be put in there. And yeah, then the default values. In general, in most cases, I would steer away from default values. There are cases where it does make sense. If you want to control specific default parameter values, you can also do it outside of your function or outside of your module, and you can do that with PS default parameter values. And the way that works is that is a hash table. You can add the command name and then the parameter name, and you can set a default value there. And we have parameter sets. Has anyone ever used dynamic parameters? Yeah? Was it a fun experience? It can be quite useful, yes. I'll show some examples of where I used it, where it was quite useful, but understanding what's going on, it goes against what I was saying earlier, where you can make things easier to understand by using advanced parameter functionality. This one makes it harder to understand, but definitely more powerful, and there's some really good use cases. So after our coffee break, I'd like to hear what you and some of the others have done with it. And for now, thank you, and I'll see you back at 11. All right, welcome back, everyone. We actually have a little PowerShell quiz before we continue with all the code, just to. But the challenging part will be not to show the answers before. Oh yeah, easy. All right. Yeah, how are we going to do this? I guess we're just going to do a show of hands. Who thinks it's number 2? B, sorry. This is to warm up a little bit. get process. I've already showed it, so I assume that most here are familiar with that one. It is indeed get process. Next one, bit of a trick question. Which one is for case insensitive string comparison? So A is actually case sensitive, so the C stands for case sensitive. I is specifically case insensitive, but the default with dash equal is also case insensitive by default. So in case the defaults are not what you expect, then because it might be on a system that runs with different kind of defaults. So if, for example, if you would do it on a Linux file system, then you might want to explicitly make it insensitive. So yeah, C was specific, but B I would have counted. I was thinking of doing like this whole thing with a QR code, but then I would have had everyone to scan the QR code and we would probably waste 10 minutes on that. So sweet. So in Pester, what command is used to define a block of test cases or can contain a block? I heard B. And anyone else have a different idea than B? No? Well, that was the correct answer. Yeah? Is it going to be B again? That's the question. What is 2? Is anything 2? Anyone? Yeah, see, not all B. What does the pipeline operator do? Not all B. There we go. There we go. It was just a short break, just to get everyone back into the room. So, since we did have a break, I'll just open up the slides where we were before. So we talked about parameter best practices, so descriptive parameter names, do some parameter validation, include parameter sets. You can set default values. Dynamic parameters, I'll show them. I heard that Christian also had some use cases for it. I had some use cases for it, so we're going to take a look at that. My idea is that we'll go slides, demos for approximately the next hour, and then we'll go take a look at a couple of implementations of PowerShell functions, and try to understand why things were implemented in a certain way. So, tying back to what I said at the start, if you have a function that's publicly available on GitHub, we can take a look at that. You can get feedback from an entire room of people. So if you're brave enough, and otherwise, I'm going to be brave enough, and we're just going to have a look at my at my functions. But up to you. Does that sound good? I've unplugged the mouse, so we're not going to have the taskbar pop up anymore. So run the demos, and they didn't all fail, so. Cool. So, yeah, we're not going to run this one. Oh, wait, we are going to run this one. There was a reason this was here. So we have get greeting again, a variation of get personal greeting that we ran before. But this time, we followed some better practices. We can now include, we've included that the name is a string, and also that it's mandatory. One thing to note here is I wrote this as mandatory is 2, but this is also a switch parameter, so there's no reason to include mandatory is 2. So we can also leave it out, and then it's present, and that is good enough. The only reason why you would want to do this, I think it's PowerShell 2, but if I'm wrong, someone will correct me. I think PowerShell 2, you needed to specify it, but it's no longer necessary. So for all the switch ones, we can leave it out. But yeah, I'm not particular. Out of habit, I still write mandatory is true because I've been writing it for I don't know, a decade. More than a decade. I'm old. So yeah, let's run this one. Let's get away from that topic. So yeah, if we do get greeting, we can see, okay, it won't throw an error, but we do have to enter something. So that is good, because if we use it interactively, that is indeed what we want. But this also has the downside that if you run this in a pipeline or in some kind of automated process, you can shoot yourself in the foot as well if you use parameter is mandatory, because you can break your workflow, and it's obvious that you should always put something in. But if you have a workflow where you assume that some value is going to be populated by the previous commands that we're executing, and for some reason that is not the case, you might break your workflow. And imagine if you have this in a startup script with GPOs or with anything like that, then you would never get to anymore. So use it with caution. Sometimes it's better to just throw an error and don't use this kind of validation. So there is a time and a place where you can not be that specific and throw an error at a different point, or throw an error instead of getting this kind of behavior. So that's something to keep in mind. So I mentioned validation. There's a couple of things that we can do there. We have validate set. We have validate script, we have validate pattern. Validate pattern is with regular expressions. Who here loves regular expressions? Wow, actually love it? Just have ChatGPT guide it. It will very convincingly come up with things, and it's sometimes right. Ultimate consultant for the consultants in here. So to showcase, obviously this doesn't do a whole lot because we don't do anything with it, but oh wait, I should do it in here. So if you do set environment, we can see we have the environment, and we can just tap to it, and we can see all the options we have. So we make it easier, like I mentioned, and make it easier for our end users to be able to discover what is in there. So validate set is one way of doing it. You could go one step further. You could define your own classes, because classes are supported. You can also define your own enums and then set an enum instead of just a string. Yes.
So when you say, okay, environment equals block, work out.
Yeah.
And if you do this via an enum,
yeah.
it doesn't.
Okay. So what Christian said was that you can override this. So you can go for an option that is not in the validate set by setting a default value. Let's see if it's the case.
Tell us my wife.
This is recorded. You can show this video. You just have to copy at time. This is what you need to do. Just clip it. There we go. It's on the internet now. It's forever.
It must be true.
Sweet. So let's take a look at let's make this one bigger. So we have a slightly longer function. So what we have here, we have the parameter. We say pipeline is 2. 2 is again optional. We say it's a string. We have a begin, process, end block. So for any function that you create, but also for each object that you run, you always have a begin, process, and end block. But if you just if you don't specify it, it will just always assume that you're in the process block. So now we specify it to highlight that this is actually the case and to show what you can do with it. So what we do in the begin block we just say starting function. We initialize our variables. So whenever you do anything with counts or things like that, you can put it in your begin block. The process block will run for any name that's put in there. And the end block, it will say how many times it executed, if it works. So let's load that one up. So then this should work, right? It does not work because it is still not a right command. So that's a bit of a downside. So we have to write it like that, like this, and we can see starting function, receive name.
How does that?
Yep, I can show that here. So this is shorthand for each object. It should be known to most of you. So we can see it's the process block because it just shows this 10 times. What? This does apply to functions. So if you don't specify it in your function, it is a similar behavior for each object. And if you specify 2, then I assume this is the begin block, but now I'm not entirely certain. So let's see if this is the case, because it might be that it's process and end, because I'm not specifying it. So let's find out. Yeah, that was right. But you get for each object, you have that as parameters. So we have begin, and we have process. So this is a similar behavior for each object as well as in your functions. And what this allows you to do is, I see a lot of people that use for server in servers just so they can have a count, and you can just do it with for each object this way, and then you use the pipelining methodology instead of for, the keyword for. Yeah, but you can use pipeline variable for that if you're using for each object. So if you don't want to confuse your dollar underscore, then you can also do pipeline variable and then specify something. And then if you go down another level, then the parent loop will have that variable. But yeah, otherwise you can also manually in the process block also just assign the variable. But if you get to that point, you probably, yeah, as always, it depends. So, pipeline variable, I think it's only available if I would pipe this onwards to the next one, then something is available. So let's try it. So if I do this, then it should be. It's probably going to be begin and 1 to 10. Let's see. Yeah. And then something should be 10. So it should be 10 times 10, I think. Or is it everything? Let's find out. Yeah, something is just. So you get it from one level up. So you can set the pipeline variable there. The main reason to use for instead of use for each object, so the for keyword, is once again performance, and depending on what you are trying to achieve. If you want something to run as fast as possible, in most cases, the for keyword is faster because there is no pipelining with the for keyword. So what you get with a for statement is whatever is in that statement is going to execute. You can't pipe it. You can pipe it, but you can only pipe it when it's completed. What happens with for each object, that it moves to the pipeline. So if things have some kind of delay in there or it takes longer to execute, the first object that's completed in a for each object pipeline will be put onto the next command, so it can start processing that one while the rest is still coming in. And that's not the case with for. So that is a consideration to keep in mind if you're trying to optimize for performance. So the question is there a difference between for each object and the for each keyword? Yes, but it also depends on the version of PowerShell that you're using. So it used to be, I'm not sure if it was 5 or 6, where if you used the for each method of an array, that it would be faster than using for each object, but I think they optimized that now. Another example, it's a bit of a tangent, but another example of something that was performing poorly was if you would pipe things to out null, it would start an entire new pipeline every time you would pipe to out null. Well, the only thing that you wanted to do was make sure that it doesn't show up on screen. And the faster way was to do $null or give it a void type, use the void type accelerator. That would be faster. But those are things that they've optimized as PowerShell matured. So I think in the current version there should not be a performance difference there. So the question is, what if you use for each parallel? Is that going to perform worse or better? That really depends on the kind of workload that you're doing. So if you're doing something like a ping command, which will always take 3 seconds and a number of milliseconds with the default amount of pings, then for each parallel will always be faster because you do multiple at the same time. Is for each parallel always the fastest way? No, there's also run space jobs, and you can make your own run space factories using the .NET classes yourself. That might be faster, but it depends what you're trying to do. I'd say for each parallel or start PS job, which is the same technology, if you have longer running jobs, it will perform better if you do that. Yes. But if you're doing something like a calculation or something that is adding something to an array or things like that, then it will not be faster, and you might get unexpected results because one command might finish faster than another, and then things get out of order. So that's one thing you need to keep in mind there as well. If the order of processing is important, then using parallelization is can give you additional complications as well. But for tasks where you try to do things against multiple servers or multiple anything remote from your system, you can increase the performance by quite a bit. Yeah.
For each object, would be any faster if you use the input object flag as opposed to piping to it?
The question is, would for each object be faster if you don't pipe into it, but you use input object? Yes, that is similar to what I mentioned with piping to out null. It used to be faster if you use input object, but as far as I know, that's been optimized. It might still be slightly slower, but the way the compiler works is it looks at what is happening in the code, and it will do just-in-time compilation to fix whatever inefficiency is in your code and optimize it on the back end. So it should not be slower anymore. I would be surprised if it's still the case because they have worked on that. But if anyone from the PowerShell team would be in the room, we can definitely ask them later. I'm sure they'll show up. I'm going to change this one now, and we'll do it without a process block, and we're going to see if it works. I think is that fair? I would assume that it would work because I think it should be implied.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes, I can repeat the question. The question was, is the process block implied in a function? And
In a non-advanced function, it is.
Yep.
Because if you do a filter, for example, as what is a function, basically, it's a one process block where you can pipe through.
mhm.
So everything you can pipe through gets automatically iterated via the process block itself.
So what we got from Christian is that everything sorry. So for basic functions, it is the case. For advanced functions, it's not the case. In this one, I don't use commandlet binding, but this one will still default to being an advanced function because we use some of the advanced functionality here. So
Even if you don't explicitly define commandlet binding, they'll still use it?
yeah.
Wow.
So we can verify that by looking at function, get item function, see if no process, and then select star, then it should still be commandlet binding 2. See? So even if in this case, so just to take one step back, even though we didn't explicitly use commandlet binding here, we implicitly used it by using the value from pipeline, which is only available in advanced function, so it knows it is an advanced function. So let's verify that this. So you're saying that it would not work on an advanced function like this, or? Okay.
Advanced functions
Yeah.
always have the process block implied. So that's always the same thing also for basic functions.
Mm-hmm.
At least my understanding.
That's my understanding as well. So yeah, it would say that's the case. Yep.
Whatever the last object in the pipeline was.
Yeah. Yep.
I had to go find the Microsoft documentation because I know I've done this many times before. And the about help for functions from Microsoft says you aren't required to use these blocks in your functions. If you don't use a name begin process end block, PowerShell puts the code in the end block of the function. So
Thank you.
on the process block, it's the end block.
Thank you.
But it's just, and I've never understood why that is. That's always been a question because that makes no logical sense.
Yeah.
But somebody who wrote this thing that's way smarter must have a reason.
So it turned out that the default is that it goes into the end block. That's why in the example here, we also saw that it only shows the last object. So that's good to know. Yeah, so let's go back to this function and load up this one again. So if we do receive a name, we can see we get 1 names. If we do multiple ones, and this is one that I always find a bit of a pain, that whenever you need to put an array in, you need to put quotation marks around all the different names. Luckily, there is an easier way to do it as well. So we just do Jaap, Fred, Christian, and just pipe it like this. So echo is alias for write output. So now we don't need to put quotation marks around it. So it's nice, nice shorthand. I like it. Anything that makes it shorter is good for me. So let's run that. You can now say we have 3 names. But one of the things that still annoys me is that if it's only 1 name, it says processes names. So let's go fix that. I mean, an if-else statement would, of course, be pretty simple to implement, but we haven't used switch blocks yet. So in this case, we'll use a switch block. We'll switch it on count. If count is 1, then it will be name, and otherwise it will be names. We'll still be wrong for 0, but sweet. So now the dynamic parameters. What we need to do to just get a dynamic parameter in there. Let's see if I can. Let's see. There we go. Some line wrapping. So we need to create a parameter dictionary. We need a runtime parameter. We need to create objects for that. We need to add our parameters in there, and then we need to return the parameter dictionary. So it makes it slightly harder to read what the result is going to be. And in this case, there's also not a real reason to do this because we just specify a single parameter. But to show what we get here, one of the things that I should have mentioned is we can have both. So we can have a normal parameter block, and we can also have a dynamic block next to it. So it can be in addition to the parameters as well. One of the things to keep in mind, if you are going to use dynamic parameters, keep performance in mind, because every time you access your function, whenever you type a parameter, it will calculate the dynamic parameter. So even if it's just a quarter of a second delay, it's going to be annoying. So keep that in mind.
With dynamic parameters, from my understanding, you have to specifically say that this comment binding in there, because otherwise they won't work.
So we need to specifically say commandlet binding. Yeah, okay, let's give it a go. We'll first run it as is. See that it does as little as it does, but just to showcase how that works, get dynamic data. And we have the dynamic param. So we can see we have the dynamic parameter value that we put in there. And let's see if we can break it by removing commandlet binding. I think it would break it now because it's not implied anymore, but let's see what happens. And yeah, so it doesn't work now, but would it still not work if we make it implied? That's what I wonder. So yeah, what we're doing now is trying to find out how smart PowerShell is and where we are breaking it. It works again. So yeah, it does work with implicit commandlet binding, but it doesn't work if it doesn't know commandlet binding. So yeah, there's some edge cases there. So I had a chat with Christian before. He also used dynamic parameters. What did you use it for?
That will show on Thursday, but I made you an example for today. If you like, you send it over the Twitter or if you like. I don't know if you want to show it up or
Yeah, I can show it at the end if you can send it on Twitter. That cool. We'll take a look at it near the end of the session. Let's see. Oh yeah, we still have time. Good. In my case, the use case that I had for it was on the Windows file system. You have all kinds of attributes on your well, every file system. There's a lot of attributes. So if we take a look at let's say parameter should be what do we have here? Yeah, parameter. So we do get item parameter. So if we see this and we take a look at kind of things we have available, can see that there's a lot of properties that are available. That's also what you see in Windows Explorer. So what is the extension? What kind of when was it changed? What's the path? There's a lot of default attributes for every file. But in Windows, there's also extension attributes, and they are not only Windows version specific, but also specific based on whatever is configured on that particular Windows box. And in order to work with those extension attributes and to make them more discoverable, I have a function here, and I needed, for myself, I needed to have a reason to use dynamic parameters. So this was the reason for me. Do you guys use GitHub? Used it once, heard of it? Probably, yeah? Do you know what dot does if you press dot on GitHub? Yes. Ah, excellent. So I hear that it also works in Azure DevOps now, so makes it a lot easier to show off code directly from GitHub. So what I did here, so you can see the same kind of logic. So we have attributes, we have the parameter set names, and now instead of specifying a single attribute, we are a single parameter. We're now specifying the attributes of that parameter, which we could fill in. So we can see an overview and we can tap to it or get a list of all the available extension attributes. And the kind of things you can think of, if it's a photo, for example, it will tell you the location or the kind of camera. But the exact naming of that is also dependent on the localization of your Windows version. So I'm happy I never had to do anything with it professionally. For me, it was just a reason to use dynamic parameters. So something you can do, and yes. If I don't have to set this, no. So the comment was I specifically set this to all parameter sets. Is that mandatory? No, because I don't think I have different parameter sets because all I have is full name. So what this does is it just looks at the file name or the folder name, and then it will collect it based on that. So no, it's not mandatory. It's a bit of boilerplate code as well. Let's see from when this one is. Yeah, 2015. So it's like, let's get away from the topic of me being old. No. So the question is, would we be able to use full name in here? No, we would not be able to use that because this is before the function executes, so then it doesn't have access to that. Yeah, the only way you could do that is if you would specify it before the function execute. But yeah, then you get. So the question is, if you want to take the input that comes into the function as input for dynamic parameters? Yeah, I would. As far as I'm aware, you need to put them as existing variables before the function executes and not as a parameter of the function. There might be a way of doing it, but I'll summarize it for the rest of the audience and the recording. Yes, it is possible in some cases because it has to be specified before the dynamic parameter. If you use plotting, you need to use an ordered list and not a default hash table, because then you're not in control of the order, and then semi-random. So that's dynamic parameters. I can still confuse myself with that. So if you want to keep yourself in a job or at an assignment, then these are the kind of technologies you should be using. because you'll be the only one that understands it. Cool. So let's get into some parameter sets and see what we can do with those. So what we have here is commandlet binding. I've been a good scripter this time. I've actually supplied it, and I've also set a default parameter set. So that's by name is the default. And we specify name as a string, and we specify the ID as an integer. So this is what I mentioned earlier as well, is that by specifying things by specific types as well as by name, then you can have your functions be better at pipelining things into it, even if you're piping something in there that was not exactly expected for that function. As long as it has a name or ID property, it will be able to understand what is happening and still execute correctly. And we'll do some experimentation with that to see how that works and how we can show that. So let's see. Get resource. We just do name test, so we can see that we get it by name. So if we do get resource without specifying it, let's see if it understands. It does not understand that. Let's pipe it in there. That should also not work. Let's try that. So we don't have pipelining available? No. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't expect it to fail there. And if we would specify it by ID, you can see that we get it by ID. If we would enable pipelining, then we can also pipe things in there. And if we have PS custom objects or any kind of objects that either contains a name or an ID and a name and an ID, then it will default to the name because we specified that the default one is that it goes by name. Cool. So let's do a bit with validate script and see what we can do with that. So the way validate script works is you can provide a script block as long as that script block returns true or false or just something, and then it will assume it's true because everything is true because true is on the left side. Then it will accept it. And one of the benefits of using validate script over, for example, validate pattern. Validate pattern is nice because you get regular expressions and they're really powerful. But the moment that regular expression fails, then it's really hard to understand for people what they did wrong. So that is, for me, a major reason not to use regular expressions. Even if I want to use regular expressions, I would probably still use validate script, because then at least you can include an error message or write error or write warning. This is what we're expecting here. So that is why I, in general, would go for validate script, even though validate pattern would perform better in that case. So let's see if it actually works before I go off on too long of a tangent while I'm trying to show this. Let's do parameter.ps1. You can see it's a valid file path. And let's do /users. Nope, that is not correct. So in this case, we don't have any kind of error handling included in here, so it will explain why it's not returning true. But what we could do is we could put a if-else statement or a switch statement in here, so we can do a write warning or a write error, so we can control the kind of error message that is coming out there, and that is something that I would advise. Yes. So the way I implemented it was just a write warning as an informational thing. So I just let it. I let it fail the same way, but I use a warning message to give people an idea of why it failed. So I still let it fail the same way, but there are cases where you can make it break in a specific way by throwing an error. I generally use write error instead of throw, because throw overrides your default error variables, so you can make things more difficult for yourself that way.
That's why I was asking.
Yeah.
What's better?
Yeah, that's correct. So the question is, what do I prefer to use whenever I'm using validate script? If I use throw or if I use write error, and then I would use write error, because then the error action preference that you specify, you can control. You can still capture the errors in the error variable that you specify if you enable that for your function or the general error variable. So I would use that. And let's highlight that as well, because that was a good example of why we do that. So if we would do error action preference, typing is hard. So it's silently continue. And if we check it now, you can see that it's set to silently continue. One of the nice things that some of you will be aware of, but others will not, that any enum in PowerShell, enums are always ordered. You can also just use the array indexing once again. So you can just say is 0, and then it's still silently continue. And if it's 1, then I think that was stop, but yeah. So you can set it directly this way. Once again, this is really good to use if you want to make your code harder to maintain and harder to understand. So yes. So the question is, if I change the parameter name.
If I change the value of file path inside the function, will you select the validation script?
No, because the validation script looks at the validation of the parameter it's set on. So it doesn't matter what will happen if it does validate and it is a file. If I would make this one not file path, then it will just display nothing, because not file path is not specified. Is that what you mean? Yeah, I think I understand the question. So if I change file path within the function, if it would then still break the validation. As far as I'm aware, that validation happens the moment it checks that parameter. If you change it later on, it would not matter. So yeah, the way I understand what Christian is saying is that if it's like a bar and there's a bouncer at the door, if you get in and you're not drunk, they will let you in. But if you get shit-faced at the bar, it doesn't matter, because you're already in. Did you get it? There we go. Sweet, so let's put the error action and let's see what we get then. So test file path, valid, and then if we make it a user, it will no longer throw an error now because we made it nice and silent. So if we would use throw in there, then it would still be messy as far as I think. So let's actually find out if that's the case. I'm not sure if, I don't think I need a double, but I just do it to not break it on that. So this is another one. You can use the exclamation mark instead of dash not, another one to make your code more complicated to understand for others. If not, then throw error. So let's intentionally throw and see what we get done. So test file path. Oh no, it still behaves properly. But yeah, there are cases where throwing might complicate things, but in this case, apparently it doesn't override it. I'm surprised because I thought in most cases it would. But that is all. Yeah. Return error. Yeah, then now it doesn't like it anymore. We broke it. Oh wait, no, did we? Yeah, we did. So yeah, I like write error because then it does what I expect it to do. There's a lot of ways you can break your code. It's always a lot more fun to break it when it's not in production and when it's not a Friday. Well, never, not never. If it's the Friday before you, it wasn't a question, it was a statement. Never change anything on Friday. If you don't like the people you are on the team with, and you're about to go on a holiday, change something on Friday.
So I actually just tested what he was saying.
Yeah.
I wanted to test it because we are very, very strict about not changing parameters inside your function for the very reason that he had mentioned before. So it actually does get reevaluated. And that's the reason we never change parameter inside your script. So if you actually do what he had mentioned before, which is have a validate script, test that, and then you reassign that parameter, it will get reevaluated inside the script, even if it gets fine.
So it does error out? Oh? Let's
That's like the main reason to not reassign the parameter once it's been defined inside of the function.
Let's do it.
So if you just on line 128 or 138, just say file path equals something that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll get rid of test because that one we don't need. Get rid of return. There we go. Now we're good again, right? Yeah. So you're saying that if I do change it inside, it would fail. So let's first get this one. Oh, error action preference. Okay, so it fails, but if we do parameter, it passes. And it's
so now I can just add a new line on 138 and just say file path equals, whatever, C nothing.
quotation marks. Okay, that's interesting. My assumption was that it would not re-evaluate it. So let's see what happens. So we run it against a file and it's still, yeah, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
that's why you never do.
Cool. Okay, well, I guess don't get drunk in a bar. That's the conclusion. That's my takeaway. Cool. So another one with a default parameter, so we can access the objects of it. So it's not the way that I would format my date, but just to show that you have access to the full object, and you can make it a more normal looking date, because the American date notation always confuses me. I'm just a simple European soul. It's Yep. Hmm? Yep. And then if we do, yeah. Got a. Yeah. There we go. Now it's bananas. Yeah. So for the people in the audience, if you are going to work with the variables that you define as a specific type, if it can be converted to that type, so in this case we had a date-time object, we could not, bananas is not a proper date-time object, so that one failed. So you explicitly have to set the type if you reuse that same variable. The best approach would be not to reuse that variable. But if you do, then set the explicit type, and then PowerShell starts to look like an actual programming language where if you don't specify the correct type, you're going to get errors. So. Let's see. We'll skip that one. We'll go for a validate range. So that's also one of the validation that you can do. So you can set a certain range. So in this case, this is 1 to 100. So if you do anything out of that range, you get a similar error again. Nothing too exciting there. That you need to break things. So let's do 100. So that works. 101 does not work. 91.5 does work because it can be converted to the integer. So that does work. So this one is a nice function that I'm not going to run because that's having to have faith in my code, and I don't have that much. Faith in my code, but this is another situation where confirm impact can be beneficial because it will prompt you. Let's just. No, I'm not going to. Yeah, I can just comment this one out. So what confirm impact does is that it will ask you, are you sure you want to do this potential destructive thing? You can also do this for your own functions. But similar to parameter mandatory, if you do this in any kind of automated workflow and it prompts you, then you might break your automated workflow again. So you might not want to do that. But there are of course good cases where you do want to do it because as As I mentioned, it can also help protect you from accidentally deleting a whole bunch of data. So, for example, you think it's going to delete a single file, so you then press yes because it's supposed to be an interactive script. Then when the second one pops up, you know that probably that was not supposed to happen, so you can still get out of it instead of getting rid of all your files. This is also a case, just tying back in to using that .NET object to delete it. That would be bad because then you actually delete everything. I've had it with a colleague of mine. He was totally not me, who didn't do proper input validation on a function like this to clean up temporary files. It's really fast. It can delete a lot. People that say that PowerShell isn't fast, it's like all the servers gone. Another one to keep in mind, whenever you have any kind of long-running scripts that are resetting servers, make sure you have some time validation, because if it pauses or gets stuck for some reason and then in the middle of the day for some reason starts running again, people will get upset. Those were the old Windows days where we actually manually reset all the workstations during nighttime, just to make sure that it was like fresh and good to go again. It's great when it happens at nighttime. It's less good when it happens during daytime. Let's see. So aliases. Because we like customizing things, we can also throw aliases for our commandlets functions. We don't talk about commandlets. So server status, there's computer name, that works. Oh, we should actually do server 1. But if we tap, or if we type host name, it will also autocomplete. And if we do get member, do we get to see the aliases? Oh no, because it's just the output. Yeah. But if we do if we look at the definition of this function, we would be able to see the different aliases that are assigned there. Let's see, we're at 12:10, so I'll break out of this one because I can keep on going on about all the different options about parameters. I think it would be more fun to do the last 20 minutes with some actual examples of scripts and advanced functions. So we'll start out with the one. Christian, did you send it on Twitter? Yep, cool. Let's hope I don't have an offensive Twitter timeline at the moment. Apologies if I do. There we go. Okay, let's take a look. So you. That's what I'm. Is this something Azure?
No, just a basic concept of it's more like how to implement if you have several routes, for example, but have in common one thing like the ID. And for example, we have the root of for an API, imaginary API, user and devices. And you can say, okay, I have ID and I want to have an endpoint wrapper function, let's say. And then you go straight through and create switch parameters just specifically on the routes that you choose. And the output itself, down below, you can see it barely on the back screen in the right house. You would directly point to the piece bound parameter, because they also use parameter set names, which endpoint is used, and got the parameter ID from the regular parameters.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, it just a little bit
Yeah. Cool.
So it's more or less like auto-generating functions. So if a new endpoint came, then I could just leverage this and put it on my array, for example, and could be also expanded.
Sorry?
And the array could be also expanded stored.
Mm-hmm.
Like attach them with a GitHub action or something like that, and the function itself stays fresh.
Ah, that's a pretty sweet use case. More useful than the extension attributes that I showed. Cool. Does anyone have a function that they want to have taken a look at? Excellent. Then I'll just go for something. So some of the things that we didn't cover yet is some of the more advanced use cases where when you're working with structured data, where the kind of code that you're writing is very predictable. Sometimes it can also be worth to have either PowerShell code that will write your code for you, or to do an abstraction layer on top of it, because every command is going to be the same anyway. So let's take a look at an example for that and see what that can look like. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at some of the commandlets we have available here. So I didn't like configuring my Windows 11 every time, and what I did was I just made a function for every setting that I always wanted to execute. But instead of putting all the information of the registry information or whatever kind of information we needed to set in order to set this particular setting, I abstracted it away. I created a function that's called invoke configuration data, and the entire function and how it executes is done based on that. And it can have different sources. So let's take a look at what that can look like. So if you look at invoke configuration data, it will take a look at which command that was called. Got a right verbose in there. Look for the specific configuration data, and then based on what it was, whether it was set or let's see, what was the else if? Get or remove. For remove, I didn't have any of commandlet that did remove yet, so that one's still empty. It would then execute and make changes to that registry value, and if it was an external command, we could also put additional information in there for that. So, for example, if I want to hide the file extensions, then where did I put the data? So file extension. We can see here that I have a JSON file that I can then maintain. So if there would be any changes, I don't have to update my commandlet, but I could do it here. Is this the most practical way of doing it? No, but I was bored and I figured I could abstract things away until I got to a point where I was happy. So that is one of those. What else can we do with this one? Let's see if there's any in here that didn't have a registry value. Are they all registry? Ah, that's unfortunate. I'll go for this one. This was my one of the functions when I was still in an open floor plan office. Sometimes had things on my screen that should not be on my screen, and I needed to have a way to quickly hide all my windows. So don't ask me why. So I tapped into user DLL, got the show window method, and what I was able to do is I could set up this function with a list of either window names or programs that were running, and then the moment I would press enter, they would all be gone in my PowerShell window. And if I would either press enter again or type my password, then all my windows would come back. It was pretty useful. I haven't used it for a while, but yeah. So those were the two examples I had there. That one. Go to the. Let's see. We still have 15 minutes. Let's go a bit into error handling then. Or are there any questions I can answer? Because like I said, I'm talking for 3 hours, and I rather make it as relevant as possible instead of just broadcasting. But if you want to hear error handling, I can also go into that. Error handling? Sweet, let's do it. It's good to hear that you all like to hear me talk more than I do, so that's at least something. Sweet. So error handling, what are we trying to do? The first thing we need to do when we do error handling is understand what can go wrong with your code, because if you have no idea what can go wrong, I mean, you can put a try-catch around anything, but if you don't know what kind of errors can happen, then it might not be the most useful, because then you might as well set error action preference to continue and silently continue and just keep on going. And also what you want to happen. So we've also talked about that. Whenever your code fails, what should happen? Should you get an error message? Should it throw? Should your script keep on running? Should it try something else? Those are all things that you should keep in mind. But also, whenever your code fails, also understand what kind of errors it can throw. Because when using try-catch, the standard catch will just catch anything, but you can also specify a specific error. So if you look at the error message by either using getError or by using the error variable, you can get the specific error type, and you can then catch on that. And so, for example, if you're doing any kind of file operation or any file operation over the network, and there's a network timeout, for example, then you could build in logic in your script where you can catch that. And if that happens, you will just retry. And if it doesn't work 3 seconds later, retry 6 seconds later. And if it then doesn't work, then throw an error. So understanding what is going on is important. And also, scoping the way you catch your errors also helps. So there's terminating errors and non-terminating errors. So just because an error is displayed in your terminal, it might not stop your operation. You can also determine that either globally by setting the error action preference to on a global level, but that can also be overwritten. Let's see, terminating, non-terminating. Yep, this one I didn't have covered yet. So yeah, we have the terminating, non-terminating errors. Try-catch finally. You don't have to use all of them. You can use all of them. Finally, you can usually do cleanup actions for anything that you've collected or executed in there. You have the error variable. You can also clear this one. One of the things you can do for most of the PowerShell commandlets is you can specify error variable. So you can make a specific error variable. So one of the things that I've used it for in the past, if I wanted to quickly know which folders I didn't have access to, I could do a recurse get child item, do a specific error variable, and then just record in that error variable all the paths I didn't have access to because I wasn't privileged there. So then I knew that if I was doing a file server migration, I could quickly get an overview of the paths that a specific user, if I would run it in a specific context, didn't have access to. And then based on that, I could do either reporting or take immediate action. So be aware that you can use custom error variables for that purpose. I've already, yep.
Does it append to it?
Yes. Yeah. So the question was, does it depend? Yeah. So if you do a get child item, if there's 10,000 files or folders, then you have 10,000 files or folders in that specific one. Another way you can do that, if there's no error variable available, I have to stop soon. But it's been good. Another thing you can do, but it's more of a brute force way, you can reset the error variable. You can do error.clear, use that .NET method, and then record it or save it to a new variable after your command is done running. But error variable is a cleaner way of doing that. Already mentioned all the different preferences that are available. So confirm, debug, error action preference is the obvious one. The one that is missing here was the error. What was that one called again? The error. How concise the errors were. What was it? Error view. Yes, thank you. And you can control the kind of output that you get. What if preference is also nice if you're doing something potentially damaging. Then you can set what if. The challenge with using what if is that if you expect a command to not execute anything when what if is called, and it does actually execute, it can still potentially be destructive. So I'm still hesitant with that. That's also why I refrained from using the remove item script before, because it's my own box. I'm not gonna destroy that one. But if I can borrow yours, I will gladly show it. Some of the other options that we have is we have $? Anyone know what that one does? Of course you do. Tell me.
Last execution return code, like I say. So if it's 0, it's okay, it's fine. If it's 1, then something happens, and you ask by if $? And then you can terminate your script. It's really old-fashioned.
Yeah, it's indeed an old-fashioned way. I'll show what it does. So we do get item. This one is right. So this one, no, that doesn't work at all. So now if we check this one, you can see, no. So it's false. What this means is last execution was not okay. If we do it again, it's true. So if it doesn't work, just do it again. The reason it's true the second time is because the next execution was executing $? And because that one was successful, it was now true. Things to keep in mind. There's also last exit code. So that one's 0 now. Not sure what it would do with this one. Yeah, because this is not this is a PowerShell command set, so last exit code doesn't work there. Last exit code is something mostly used for external applications. External applications can throw exit codes, and you can base your behavior based on that. You have error action that you can specify, an error variable. Also already mentioned that. Then if you want to tie into that, going deeper, you can use set PS debug, wait for the debugger, PS breakpoints. This one is duplicate. And then what you actually really want to do if you're doing any kind of troubleshooting and debugging, mention it at the start as well, just use VS Code because it's all integrated there. So with that out of the way, I'm not going to make James more upset because he already came in. This is the questions. We skipped over the questions. And here's the link for the review. We have 3 minutes left. If you have any other questions, I'll still be around here. Please fill out the form. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Lunch will be served in 3 minutes. And yeah, thanks for the interaction. I enjoyed it.